I'm Alex, and my name is Emily, or at least I think it is. From the moment I moved back into the old house with my mother, strange things started happening. Shadows moved on their own, whispers filled the hallways, and every mirror reflected someone I didn't recognize, someone who was always watching me. But the worst part, the part that chills me to my core, is knowing that my own mother isn't who she seems to be. She's waiting, always watching, and I have no idea what she'll do next. I always thought my mom was a little unusual at first. It was easy to dismiss it as quirks or habits that some people have, but over time it became impossible to ignore. She moved through the house like a shadow, quiet and deliberate, and sometimes I would catch her standing in corners, watching me. She never said anything, never acknowledged that she was there, but I could feel her eyes on me. I started to notice it when I was very young, how she would linger a little too long in doorways, or how she would appear in places I was sure she hadn't been a moment ago. It gave me a strange prickling feeling in my stomach, a mixture of fear and confusion, like I was never alone even when the house was empty. At first, it was small things, easy to explain away. My toys were sometimes rearranged in odd ways. The blocks I had stacked carefully would be knocked over or lined up in strange patterns that made no sense. Sometimes I would find my stuffed animals positioned in odd places, staring at me from across the room. I thought maybe I had done it in my sleep. I told myself I was imagining things, but the feeling didn't go away. The real terror began when I started seeing her in my dreams. Not the soft, comforting dreams a child might have, but ones that were sharp and intense, filled with shadows. In my dreams she would stand at the foot of my bed, silent and still, and I could feel her looking at me, studying me. I would wake up in the middle of the night, my heart hammering, my sheets soaked with sweat. And sometimes I thought I heard her moving through the hallway outside my room. At first I chalked it up to imagination, but soon I realized the sound was real. The floorboards creaked in ways that no one else could make. Something was moving around the house when it should have been empty. Then came the notes. Small scraps of paper tucked in drawers, hidden under pillows, or folded neatly on my desk. Each one had my name written over and over in a jagged scroll. Sometimes there were words, two words that made no sense at first, like stay or forever. But the way they were written made my skin crawl. I would pick them up, shake them in my hands, and feel a cold shiver run through me. I didn't want to ask her about them. I didn't want to acknowledge that I was afraid, but a part of me knew that she had left them there. It was the night I woke up to the shadow that changed everything. I remember the feeling vividly, the sharp, icy grip of fear that held me still in bed, unable to move. At first I thought it was my imagination again, but the shadow shifted closer, slowly, deliberately. I could smell her perfume, a cloying, sickly sweetness that made my stomach turn. The shadow leaned over me, and I froze, every instinct in my body screaming to run but my muscles refusing to obey. My mind raced, trying to convince me I was dreaming, but the sensation was too real. My blanket was tangled around my legs, my heart pounding like it might burst, and I could feel her presence pressing down on me. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone. I was alone, or at least, I thought I was. My room was quiet except for the faint hum of the air vent. I tried to convince myself that I had imagined it, that fear had conjured something that wasn't there. But then I noticed it, a small note, carefully placed on my pillow. The letters were jagged, almost frantic, and yet deliberate. It said, "Don't run." I couldn't sleep after that. I lay in the dark, listening to every creak, every whisper of movement. Every shadow in the corner of my room seemed alive, every gust of wind through the cracked window like a warning. I realized I couldn't ignore it anymore. Whatever this was, whatever she was, it wasn't going to stop. And for the first time, I understood that fear wasn't just in my mind, it was real, and it was in my own house. Even now, I can't forget the feeling of those eyes on me, the cold weight of the shadow over my body, and the single, terrible message left behind. I don't know why she watches, or what she wants, but I know one thing for certain. Whatever she has planned, it isn't over. It never will be. After that night, I started avoiding my room. I stayed in the living room or wandered into the kitchen late at night, pretending to be busy, hoping she wouldn't notice me. But it didn't matter where I went. The feeling of being watched followed me like a shadow I couldn't escape. Every mirror I passed reflected her behind me, though when I spun around, the hallway was empty. The humming started then, faint at first, barely audible over the ticking of the kitchen clock, but it grew, soft and broken, a lullaby twisted into something I couldn't recognize, something cruel. I tried to convince myself it was in my head. Maybe I was imagining it all. But then the cupboards would be open, and ingredients scattered across the counters. Flour dusted the floor, like snow fallen indoors. Sometimes I would see things out of the corner of my eye, a flicker of movement, the curtains twitching though the window was closed. I started checking every door and window, making sure they were locked. I told myself I was being careful, but deep down, I knew it wasn't just about doors and locks. One evening, after a long day of trying to pretend everything was normal, I realized something terrifying. All the doors in the house were locked from the outside, not the deadbolts, the knobs themselves, completely locked. Windows too. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't open them. Panic bubbled in my chest, sharp and suffocating. It hit me then that this wasn't random. She had been planning this for months, maybe years, studying my every habit, my every fear, waiting for the right time, and now there was no way out. I began noticing my toys differently. They weren't toys anymore. They had become something else, something meant to unsettle. Dolls were lined up in rows, their tiny faces staring, their arms twisted into unnatural positions. Stuffed animals were perched as if they were watching, kneeling or leaning toward me, like they were waiting for instructions. And in the middle of the living room, under a lamp, there was a photograph of me. I had never seen it before. It was taken while I was asleep, my face calm and unaware, completely vulnerable. My thoughts raced. What was she doing? What was her plan? I felt trapped in my own home, every hallway a corridor of fear, every room filled with invisible eyes. I started pacing, trying to convince myself that maybe I could figure a way out, some loophole, some escape. But every idea felt foolish. She knew me too well. She had always known me too well. The thought made my stomach twist, and then there were the noises. At first it was just the floorboards, creaking in ways that made my skin crawl. Then it became more soft scratching, almost like fingernails dragging along walls, whispering that I couldn't hide. Every time I tried to listen closer, the noise would stop, leaving an echoing silence that was worse than any sound. I started feeling it, a creeping dread that slithered along my back, curling around my legs and chest, pulling me down, suffocating me. Finally, one night I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to check my room to see if anything new had appeared. My hands trembled as I opened the door. The room was empty, quiet, too quiet. My heart sank when I noticed the bed. There at the center was a shallow box. I wanted to scream, to throw it across the room, but I couldn't move. I forced myself closer, the smell of something sharp and metallic hitting my nose. And then I saw it, my hair, clipped, gathered, and carefully placed inside the box. I hadn't noticed it missing before, but now it was clear. She had been taking it, watching me, keeping pieces of me, as if collecting parts of my life to own. I stumbled back, falling into the corner of my room, my mind racing, my breath caught in my throat. Every instinct told me to run, to scream, to hide, but the reality was terrifying. There was nowhere to run. She had trapped me. She had been waiting, watching, and now I understood that this was just the beginning. My own mother, the person who was supposed to protect me, had turned into something I didn't recognize, a predator, patient, calculating, and obsessed. I lay in my bed that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the house, knowing she was moving silently somewhere close. The fear was almost unbearable, but what terrified me most wasn't the possibility of what she might do. It was the certainty that she could do anything she wanted, and I was powerless to stop it. And as I drifted into a fitful, restless sleep, I felt her presence again, standing over me, watching, smiling, and whispering something I couldn't quite hear, but knew I would never forget. Soon, I stopped sleeping altogether. The nights became unbearable, stretching endlessly as my eyes refused to close, afraid of what I might see if I did. Every shadow seemed alive, every creak in the floorboards like a signal that she was there, waiting. I began noticing things I had never paid attention to before, the way her footsteps were never heavy, how she seemed to glide instead of walk, and how the faintest sound of breathing would follow me wherever I went. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it, but the evidence was undeniable. Something was deeply, horribly wrong. One day, curiosity and fear got the better of me. I found her journal tucked away in a drawer in her bedroom. My hands shook as I pulled it out, and I hesitated before opening it. I told myself I shouldn't look, that I didn't want to know, but a compulsion I couldn't resist forced me to read. The pages were filled with her neat, slanted handwriting, but the words made my blood run cold. She wrote about watching me grow, recording every little detail of my life. Every note, every movement, every fear I had ever felt had been observed, catalogued, treasured. She described me as though I were an experiment, as though I were something separate from herself that needed to be contained, studied, and controlled. The sketches were worse. They were detailed drawings of my face, twisted into expressions of terror and confusion, eyes wide with fear, lips trembling. Some of them were from angles I had never imagined anyone could see, as though she had been watching me in ways I didn't even know were possible. My stomach turned, and I dropped the journal, the pages fluttering across the floor like dead wings. I felt my heart hammering against my ribs, but a part of me couldn't look away. Phones didn't work. The line was dead, and the thought of trying to run was laughable. I realized that she had been anticipating every possible escape, every scream I might make. The house wasn't just her domain, it was a trap, carefully constructed, every detail designed to make me powerless. The walls themselves seemed alive with her presence. I began hearing whispers, soft, almost melodic, curling through the hallways. Sometimes they sounded like my own voice, calling my name from empty rooms, taunting me, leading me deeper into the house. Then came the smell. I had tried to ignore it at first, but it grew stronger each day, a rotten, metallic scent that clung to my clothes, my hair, my skin. It followed me, seemed to seep out of the walls, and I knew it had a source. I had to find it. I traced it to the basement, my legs shaking, my chest tight. The door was slightly ajar, and the smell hit me in waves, hot and suffocating. I wanted to flee, but I needed to know. I pushed the door open. Inside the basement was a different world. The walls were covered with photographs, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all of me. Some were taken from the corners of rooms, some from above my bed, some while I ate, brushed my teeth, or read. There were small drawings scrawled on some of the photos, notes about my habits, my fears, the way I reacted to certain things. I felt bile rise in my throat, and I stumbled back. In the corner of the basement, there was a pile. I couldn't look too closely, but I saw enough to know it was something human, or at least parts of someone I had once known. The sight made my stomach knot, and I fell to the floor, trembling. The smell was stronger here, mingling with the thick, oppressive air. When I finally raised my eyes, I saw her. She was sitting in a chair at the far end of the basement, perfectly still, her head tilted, and her empty smile stretching across her face. The darkness seemed to cling to her, bending around her figure like a living shadow. She didn't move, but I could feel her eyes piercing through me, reading every inch of me, as though I were a page she had written herself. And then she spoke, not to me, but to someone, or something else. Her voice was soft, warped, a hum that made my skin crawl. "Soon," she said, and I realized that it wasn't just a word, it was a promise, a warning. I had survived this far, but she had plans. Plans I couldn't even begin to understand. And the worst part was knowing that whatever was coming, I was trapped. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, and no one outside these walls who could help me. I began noticing things disappearing. Not small items, but things that were part of my life: clothes, books, even little pieces of furniture. At first I tried to convince myself that I had misplaced them, that I was just forgetting. But the pattern was too consistent, too deliberate. Every time I turned around, she was there, standing just out of reach, her eyes studying me, as though she were cataloging not only what I owned, but what I valued. I realized with growing horror that she wasn't just collecting my things, she was building something, though I had no idea what. The mirrors in the house had become my worst enemies. I started noticing things in their reflections that weren't there when I looked directly. Shadows moved behind me, shapes shifted in ways they shouldn't, and sometimes her face appeared, pressed against the glass, smiling with those empty, unsettling eyes. It didn't matter how I tried to avoid the mirrors. They were everywhere, reflecting a reality that I didn't want to see but couldn't escape. I tried to hide, to make myself invisible. I thought the attic might be a sanctuary. I carried blankets and pillows up there, hoping to barricade myself from whatever she was planning. But she found me every time, standing in the doorway, quiet, patient, her gaze heavy and relentless. I would hold my breath, hoping she wouldn't notice, but I could feel it in my chest, the way her presence pressed down on me, filling the room like a physical weight. I was powerless against her, trapped in a house where every space belonged to her, and nowhere was safe. Then the note appeared again, carved into the walls, this time sharp letters etched into the wood with a precision that made my stomach churn. "Don't leave." One read. Another said, "It's for us." The words were everywhere, surrounding me, pressing into my mind. They weren't just messages, they were commands, warnings, a map of control. I tried to cover them, paint over them, but the marks seemed to resist. They were a permanent part of the house, just like her. The scratching started at night. It was soft at first, barely audible, but persistent. Fingernails scraping along walls, sometimes across the floorboards, moving closer with every night that passed. I tried to ignore it, tried to tell myself it was just the house settling, but the rhythm was too deliberate. And then, one night, the voice came, a whisper, soft and warped, curling through the air, almost melodic. It wasn't her voice. It was mine, or at least it sounded like mine, echoing from the walls, calling me by my own name. I froze, listening, my chest tightening with terror. It said things I couldn't fully understand, phrases that twisted in my mind, but one word was clear: here. I started noticing the changes in my own reflection. In the cracked mirrors of the attic, my face looked hollow, eyes darker than usual, lips pale. Sometimes I would blink, and the reflection wouldn't move the way I did, as if it had a life of its own. I realized then that she had been preparing something beyond fear. She was reshaping me, my life, my perception of reality. Every step I took, every glance I made, was part of her plan. And the longer I stayed, the more I felt it pressing into me, embedding itself in my mind. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I ran through the hallways, trying to escape, but the house itself seemed alive, shifting around me, guiding me back, corralling me. I felt her presence everywhere, soft and patient, yet terrifyingly deliberate. And when I finally reached the attic, I saw it. A new addition carved into the wall, a mirror, cracked and jagged, reflecting not just my face, but a twisted version of it, hollow-eyed and terrified, as if I was already trapped inside. I couldn't look away, couldn't turn my gaze. It was me, but not me. I sank to the floor, shivering, feeling my mind fray at the edges. She didn't move. She just stood there, smiling, always smiling, and whispered something I couldn't hear, yet knew I understood. She wasn't done. I realized then that I was already part of whatever she was creating, and there was no escaping. The house wasn't just a trap anymore, it was a reflection of her mind, a world in which I was imprisoned. And she was patient. She would wait, even in the dark. I could feel her eyes on me, following me as I curled into a corner, shivering, knowing that the next step, the next phase, the next horror had already begun. I don't know how long I've been hiding now. Days, weeks. The concept of time has become meaningless in this house. Every shadow seems alive, every whisper carries weight, and I feel her presence constantly, like a heavy fog pressing against my chest. I try to stay still, try to make myself small, invisible, but it doesn't matter. She is always there, somewhere just out of sight, watching, waiting. The mirrors show me things I don't want to see, shapes that twist when I blink, shadows that move against the light, and sometimes, when I stare too long, I catch a glimpse of her face, just for a moment, smiling in a way that turns my stomach. I've tried everything. I've locked doors, barricaded myself in rooms, whispered prayers into the darkness, hoping for protection, but nothing works. Phones don't function. The walls themselves seem to be her ears, her eyes. I realized long ago that there is no help outside this house. There is only her. I am alone, and yet not alone. I can hear her moving through the halls, humming that same sick lullaby, soft and broken, wrapping around me like chains. Tonight I felt something shift. The mirrors had become unbearable. They reflected not just the house, but parts of me I didn't recognize, hollow, pale, twisted by fear. My reflection stared back, empty-eyed, and I couldn't help but feel that it was alive, watching, waiting. In a desperate act I grabbed a heavy lamp and smashed the mirror. The glass exploded into jagged shards, cutting my hands and arms, showering the floor with glinting fragments. Pain surged through me, but I didn't care. I thought, maybe, just maybe, I could break her hold, shatter the reflection, shatter the connection. But when I looked again, the reflection remained, entire, intact, unbroken, smiling that same empty, cruel smile. It was impossible. The shards on the floor reflected pieces of light, yet her face looked back at me from the mirror that should no longer exist. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just a reflection. It was her, or maybe worse, she had made me into something that wasn't real anymore. I backed away, heart racing, and stumbled across the room. The humming grew louder, more insistent, as if the house itself were alive, responding to her. Then I heard it, the whisper, my own voice echoing from the walls, soft and distorted. "Don't leave," it said, repeating over and over. My hands flew to my ears, but it didn't stop. It came from inside me now, from somewhere beneath my skin, as if I had been split into two and one part was trapped, calling for me in terror. I realized with a sickening clarity that I wasn't alone inside this house, not just her presence, but something else, something she had created. She had been shaping me, fracturing me, turning my fear into a physical thing, something that could exist in the shadows. And as I looked around, I saw movement, shapes curling from the corners, shadows stretching unnaturally, figures that resembled me but weren't me. I tried to scream, but my voice failed, swallowed by the oppressive weight pressing down from above. Then I noticed it, the bed. Not my bed, not my sheets, but something that had appeared while I wasn't looking. It was pristine, white, almost glowing in the dim light, and on it lay a figure, my figure, I think, but hollow-eyed, pale, trembling. I realized with terror that the whispering voice was coming from it, from me, or from the part of me that had been taken, trapped, twisted by her. I backed into a corner, shaking, as the humming grew into a chorus, soft and fractured, wrapping around my mind, pressing into me. I tried to run, but the walls seemed to move, closing in, guiding me back, keeping me trapped. She appeared then, in the doorway, her eyes glinting with that patient cruelty. The same empty smile stretched across her face. She didn't need to speak. I knew what she wanted. She wanted everything, my mind, my body, my very existence. And then, in a moment I will never forget, I saw it in the corner of my eye, another mirror, reflecting the room, but instead of me, it showed her, standing over the figure on the bed, watching, waiting. And then I understood the truth. There was no escape, no outside world, no one coming to save me. I was trapped inside her world, and my reflection, my very being, had already begun to belong to her. Even now, I can feel it, moving inside the walls, inside my mind, whispering my name, humming that twisted lullaby. I don't know if I am still me. I don't know if I am still alive, but I know this: she is patient, she will wait, and somehow she will make me hers completely. The last thing I hear, as I press myself into the corner, is my own voice from somewhere in the house, trembling and desperate, whispering, "Don't leave." And I realize, with horror, that I will never be able to.